Hello, I'm Jeff Cavins, and today we're looking at the scriptures for the 24th week in Ordinary Time. Have you ever felt kind of forgotten or forsaken or left behind and nobody seemed to care about you and you just felt like you were alone in the world? A lot of us have felt like that at different times, and it's not a good place to be alone. And it's interesting because we're living in a time of social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and Snapchat, and everything else, where everybody seems to be connected, but people feel alone, and they feel left out. Today's readings really address that. In fact, all three readings do. In the book of Exodus, Moses is talking about Israel, who was really a prodigal son and was brought back to life, and God led them to freedom. In the New Testament reading in Timothy, Paul is talking about how he once was arrogant, a persecutor, and in need of great mercy, and God came to him and rescued him. And then in the gospel reading, we have an interesting number of stories about, we have a lost coin, we have a lost sheep, but ultimately we have the story of a lost son, the prodigal son. And it's an amazing story about how God goes in search of his people, as he did in Exodus and he did in Paul's life. He also does with this story too, and he does in your life as well. In this amazing story, we see, first of all, that God was willing to leave the 99 and go after the one. And that's encouraging, especially if you're the one. If you're the one that he is seeking, you would feel very special knowing that he left 99 just to pursue you and to bring you back into the fold and back into a relationship. Well, that's what Jesus has done with every single one of us. Israel, Paul, you and me. In the story of the prodigal son, we see the story of two boys, two sons. But we have one son who seems to be faithful and he stays at home and he does everything that his father requires. But we have one son who leaves his father, he forsakes his father, he goes away to another country. Well, after a time of squandering his father's money and inheritance, and he's even eating the pig's food, he ends up coming to his senses and he says, you know what? He said, it'd be better for me to be a slave in my father's house than to live this lifestyle. And he was actually a son. He wasn't a slave, he was a son. He comes to his senses, he sobers up, if you will, and he begins the return to his father. But what's interesting about the story is that all this time that this son, this prodigal son, was out there squandering his father's inheritance on loose living and everything else, what we find is that the father is actively thinking about the son and wants the son to come back. So as the son makes that turn, that repentance, the father comes to meet him, and the father is running to his son. That is a beautiful picture we see here, that the father is running towards the son to greet the son, to welcome the son. And my friend, I don't know what's going on in your life right now, but I can tell you this, the Father is actively pursuing you. If you go to confession this week, the moment you go into that confessional, God will be waiting for you. We call this prevenient grace. We call this the wooing. God is wooing you. He's drawing you to himself. And as you sit down in that confessional, God will say to you, I've been waiting. I have come to meet you in confession. I want you to be reconciled. So we're not talking about a sheep. We're not talking about a coin. We're talking about you. And this week, no matter what you've done, no matter what you've experienced, no matter the shame that you are walking in or the troubling of your heart, know this. God has left the 99. He's pursuing you this week. Will you open up your arms and embrace him? Will you receive God back into your life if you've gone away? If you do, you'll live the life of a daughter, a son of God, not a slave.